Hey y'all, what's good? Thanks for watching this short blurb of the political chop shop, as we call it here at BPMG. You guys already know me. I'm Roderick Threets, and I want to present something to you guys today because a lot of you know that I am against mail-in ballots or anything that could change the integrity of of the elections, right? And there's a Supreme Court case that actually just came down on Thursday where it actually split 5-4 on the side of the conservatives in the court in this time around against Alabama's law against voting requirements due to the coronavirus. And a few people have asked me to kind of give my synopsis on this decision since it is kind of in my wheelhouse a little bit. So we're going to get into it. First, I'm going to show you the article from Politico. Let me go ahead and pull that up here real quick. So we have the article today in Politico talking about the Supreme Court blocks judge's order loosening Alabama's voting requirements due to the virus. Let's read just a little bit into it before I give you my opinion into it. For those of you who don't know that are not familiar with this case. A sharply divided Supreme Court stepped in on Thursday night to block a judge's order requiring Alabama to allow some curbside voting and lift absentee ballot witness requirements for the Republican Senate primary runoff set to take place on July 14th. The justices voted 5-4 along ideological lines to block the lower court ruling, allowing Alabama to carry out the election under the usual rules. None of the justices issued any statements explaining the decision, show its import for future court rulings on judicially mandated voting changes because of the dangers of the coronavirus is murky. Experts say that the most likely explanation for a 2006 Supreme Court precedent viewed as discouraging late changes to voting procedures because of the possibility for voter confusion. All right. And further down, you'll see here, we're not going to read the whole thing, obviously, but you see here the Supreme Court does here say the Supreme Court majority is not siding with voters, especially during a pandemic. This is a big deal, as brought forward by Rick Hassan, a University of California law professor that actually wrote it on Twitter. And also, we know the Alabama Senate race is between a former football coach, Tommy Tuberville, against Jeff Sessions. And a lot of you have your opinions about Jeff Sessions and, all that good stuff. It is what it is. But this Supreme Court decision is a win for the 12th Amendment and holding faithless electors accountable for trying to change their votes, right? Because we have seen way too many times where electors have alluded to vote for the other candidate at their convention, right? At the for president, etc. And we have seen the scandals around that. So basically, this case that was brought up was, can states actually punish faithless electors? And I've always said, per the Constitution, they can, because the 10th Amendment, gives the way electors vote and the way the states create their voting is under the 10th Amendment. The federal government has no jurisdiction over that. So that was exactly the correct decision. Now let's go back into a little history of this case. There's a little bit that a lot of folks don't know. Because previously the Supreme Court rejected two other challenges of the constitutionality of the faithless elector laws, right, which penalized or it removed the presidential electors who failed to vote for the candidate that they pledged to support. The ruling came with just 4 months remaining in the election, which kind of scares me that people would bring up something like this close to the election, right? Now, I'm going to go back to the Political article, and you saw at the beginning how they was talking about curbside voting, right? The problem with curbside voting is you'll still have too many people handling the ballots, right? The way we voted here in Utah, because the voting booths weren't open, you went to a designated location, you picked up your ballot, you voted, and then you took it to a secure ballot box, either at a city hall, your city halls, or other places of public government, right? And you dropped your ballots off. Alabama wanted you to drive up, take your ballot, you hand you your ballot, you do your little thing on your ballot, and then you hand it back to them. That's just too much. That's too many people handling it at the same time, right? Because too many errors can happen there too. People say, "Oh, Republican ballot," people can mark the envelopes. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist here, but I'm telling you there are many different ways that elections can be cheated when too many people, it changes hands, right? So I know some of you are in the chat here. Okay, but what I want to say about that is it's the timing, right? The timing is just impeccable to try to throw an election off and set up precedent for the presidential election. Now, the Supreme Court back in May heard two different cases involving the state's efforts to enforce their faithless electoral laws during the 2016 presidential election process. One challenge arose out of Washington state, where three individuals pledged to support a candidate who won a popular vote, right? But then were chosen to serve as electors for the state's Democratic Party. But even though I think in that case Hillary won the popular vote in Washington, the three electors wrote in votes for someone else, right? Kind of defying the vote of the people, right? And that kind of reminds me of something. I don't know if y'all remember. There's a blurb that went across a couple months ago that the Democrat Party may want to replace Joe Biden, which personally it's wrong. Right, it's that those kind of instances are wrong to subvert the primary voters' vote because you don't like who the people want to put in, right? But that's a whole nother issue. But this is kind of the same thing: how your Electoral College electors voted for someone else other than who the popular vote said they wanted to be president, right? Now, and surprisingly, if I remember, a lot of three of those guys wrote in Colin Powell for president, which I found to be quite comical, right? On that, but they were trying to throw an election of the people because they thought that the other Democrat candidates would follow suit, right? So I don't know what the real true deal is with that. But these three electors that brought the case before the Supreme Court in May argued that under the Constitution, they could cast a ballot in the Electoral College from whom they wanted, but the Washington Supreme Court upheld the fines, right? The second challenge came out of my neighbor state of Colorado, where Clinton won a popular vote, but Michael Baca, I know you've probably heard the name, throughout the last couple years, he was removed from his position as an elector because he tried to vote for Republican John Kasich, right? The one of the Republican candidates for president back then, and the other two would be faithless electors, Polly Baca and what was the other guy's name? I can't remember. Robert something, but they cast their ballots for Clinton. And, these were Republicans that cast their ballot for Clinton, right? So they took their case to federal court, and the U.S. Court of Appeals in the 10th Circuit agreed with them that the Colorado's faithless elector laws violates the Constitution, which we know the lower courts are, how to say the least, not very constitutional, right? because again, we have what I always call, you guys are here all the time, talk about judicial supremacy. This is what it is. They try to supersede the Constitution and what it says. Again, the 10th Amendment covers any type of election law, that's delegated to the states, right? So, but the Supreme Court rejected that for some reason. Now, in the opinion written by Elena Kagan, she had kind of started going over the Electoral College. I'll save you the details of it. It's probably on one of my screens over there. I've read it twice already, but she started going through the Electoral College and mentioned that when Americans cast their vote for a presidential candidate, Kagan reminded everyone that they're not actually voting for president. Instead, they are choosing members of the Electoral College who are appointed by each state based on the outcome of the vote there, and then choose the president when the Electoral College meets in December. So people forget about that process with the Electoral College. Yes, the popular vote happens in November, right? But we're not electing the president in this case, right? We're setting up for the electors to go into the Electoral College to cast those ballots. So the popular vote can go one way, and the Electoral College can be completely the opposite. It can literally become the opposite. The opposing candidate could win the Electoral College, even though if you go by the popularity of votes in the states and how they're supposed to play out and vote accordingly, they would win it as such, right? So we've never really seen that kind of drastic change before, but here we are, right? But we've seen too many cases where both parties have tried to monkey around with the elections and all that stuff, right? And I will say this, right, in closing, that we have to make sure, it's up to us to make sure our voting systems are secure. We can't depend on government to do it. We need to be front and center. We need to become election supervisors, right? We need to do all of that, right? We need to do all of that to make sure our elections are safe. So again, this is a win for the 12th Amendment. This is the win for the Supreme Court of the United States and upholding the Constitution. So until next time, y'all stay easy, stay blessed, and we will catch y'all again.